Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We have so much to talk about this week, including a strong start for F1 the movie and a crashing to earth of M3GAN 2.0. In fact, one of the biggest drops from the first film to the second film in a series that we've seen this decade. And we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But before we do, I also wanted to talk about something else for a couple of minutes. I don't often take these sort of non-related asides on the channel, but I thought it was important that I did in this case. And if you're not interested, I understand. This episode is time-coded as always. You can jump ahead to our first box office story. But I wanted to talk about something that, to be honest, alarmed me somewhat. And it's something that I found out about last week. Several weeks ago, I was offered a work opportunity that was really fun. It was something that I was looking forward to. It's something that I honestly think you at home would have enjoyed a lot. And I thought that it was going to happen. I mean, we were setting up dates and trying to figure all that stuff out, but it never really got locked in. And last week, I finally found out why. And it's because it was to appear on something that was sponsored by a department of the United States federal government. And what I found out through this whole process of waiting to see what the dates were going to be, etc., was that all of the talent that was going to appear on the show had to be submitted to this government department in order to be vetted or approved. And this isn't unusual for a branded piece of programming, but the amount of time that we had to wait around was unusual. Well, last week I found out that I was not approved to appear on this program. And the reasoning given to me by the person I was speaking to at this company, and the reasoning given to them by the government agency that they were talking to, was that I was not approved for the show because I had done a video several weeks ago that was about tariffs. If you remember that video, there was a news story where the president said that he was going to impose a 100% tariff on movies that were made outside of the United States. And I did a video here on the channel. A lot of people watched it. It wasn't really critical of the idea of tariffs. I actually said at the end of it that I think that there was a way to structure something where some good could come out of this if there were, certain procedural things that happened. I don't think that it was very particularly critical of the government or the president of the United States. And I actually took a little bit of flack in the comments for being non-political, but that's really kind of what I am here on this channel. I don't get into politics that much. I have my own personal political beliefs, but this is a channel that's largely about movie news and reviews and box office, etc. So I don't really go into it. So it was really alarming for me to hear that this department of the federal government was unwilling to approve my appearance on this program just because I made a video about an idea or about a subject that they didn't like. I doubt that they probably watched the video at all. And there were other people that I heard about who were not approved, or I guess you could say denied, an appearance on this program because of statements they made on their own personal social media pages in support of the LGBTQ plus community. And I want to get ahead of this right now because whataboutism is very common now. Yes, there have been cases where people have been denied work by companies, Disney, etc., because of things they've said. But we're not talking about a company here. We're not talking about a corporation. We are talking about the federal government of the United States denying people an appearance on this program. And yes, it would also be a work opportunity based exclusively on talking about things that the government doesn't like that they are talking about. Now, I'm not asking for an appeal here. I'm not asking you to write a letter to anybody. I was told that this decision was final, and I take them at their word on that. But I also think it's just important for people to know that this happened, that this is the sort of atmosphere that we're in. And if you don't think it's a big deal, that's fine. I'm not even asking you to think it's a big deal. I just want people to know, because to me, this is a little scary. In fact, it's more than a little scary. In the grand scheme of things, is this situation that important? No, not at all. I could go to the news from yesterday and pull up 50 things that are more consequential than this. However, big changes, and oftentimes changes that are not necessarily for the better, are made up of 1,000 small things that happen day by day that people hope that you're not going to point out or that you're not going to notice. And so I did want to point this out. I did want to draw attention to it. Do I think it was my right to get a spot on the show? No, I don't. But I do think it's disturbing that I was turned down along with others for reasons that seem beyond political, almost personal, ideological. That's not right. And I would be just as angry if the shoe was on the other foot and if there was a different administration in office and they turned down people for reasons that were opposite ideologically. I don't really have any way to wrap this up other than just to say, I wanted you to know and I wanted people to know and to notice it and to pay attention. And that's all. So it's kind of an awkward transition at this point, but let's go to this weekend's box office. And as I mentioned, Brad Pitt's film F1 the movie had a very strong opening weekend at the domestic box office with $57 million. It actually came in about $1.5 million ahead of the estimated numbers from Sunday, which bodes well for the film. We'll see how it does across this July 4th weekend. It's got a lot of competition, but this is a win, a rare box office win for Apple with one of their original movies. And if it can sustain, it had a good cinema score, the reviews were pretty good, then they could finally have a movie that does well, although this was also a very expensive movie to make. In second place was How to Train Your Dragon with $19.5 million. It dropped 46.4% in its third weekend. That's a much softer landing than we saw in weekend number 2. It has now cracked the $200 million domestic barrier. In third place was Elio, which dropped 50% from its opening. That's not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. At $10.4 million, it's now at $41.5 million, although it's got a very uphill climb. I mean, there's always the story about Elemental, but I don't really see signs of a comeback similar to Elemental at this point. We'll see how it plays out over the next couple weeks. In a surprise fourth place was M3GAN 2.0, which opened to $10.2 million. That's a drop off of about 2/3 from the opening of the first M3GAN film a couple of years ago. And as far as second films this decade, it's one of the steepest drop-offs from a first to a second movie. We're going to look at that chart in detail in a few minutes. But Blumhouse kind of needing a win. A lot of people thought that M3GAN 2.0 was going to be that win. Did not turn out to be the case. 28 Years Later had a pretty steep decline. In its second weekend, it dropped 67.5% for a $9.7 million total. It's now at $50 million domestic. 67.5%, I mean, that's on par from what we often see with a horror film. I think you're seeing that B cinema score kicking in a little bit, and we'll see if that collapse continues or if it can shore up a little bit over the next couple weeks. In sixth place was Lilo and Stitch, which made another $6.8 million. It's now cracked the $400 million domestic barrier. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning brought in $4.1 million. It is trying to get to that $200 million mark. Materialist dropped 53.4% in its third weekend. It made just under $3 million for a $30 million domestic total. From the world of John Wick, Ballerina in week 4 dropped 51.4% with $2.1 million. It's at $55.5 million domestic. And Karate Kid Legends, by I think just a few $1,000s, stays in the top 10 over Final Destination Bloodlines. It's at $51.5 million domestic and obviously toward the end of its box office run. Dropping out of the top 10, we had just barely Final Destination Bloodlines out after 6 weeks, and the Indian film Kubera also out of the top 10 after just 1 week. And when we look at the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend, Karate Kid Legends leads the pack for a second week. It lost just over 1,000 theaters. It's now out of wide release in 925 theaters. Materialist lost a pretty big chunk of theaters. It lost 913. It's still in 1,931. Ballerina lost 741 theaters. It's now in 1,796. The Life of Chuck lost about 60% of its theaters. 617 of them, it's now in 455. And Final Destination Bloodlines falls out of wide release. It lost 600 theaters and is now in 742. This is what I like to call our road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is 2021 to 2024. And that dotted black line is every weekend so far this year. And you can see that we end June, as we've pretty much spent the rest of the month, a somewhat underwhelming month. Not disastrous, but definitely underwhelming, especially after what we saw in April and May. We end up just under the average for the past few years and well below where we were pre-pandemic. We will see if Jurassic World Rebirth and the holdover releases from the last few weeks will be able to bump that up as we enter the July box office season. So let's talk about some of the movies that were in the top 10, and we will start with the number one movie in the country, F1 the movie, which was the second best opening for Brad Pitt domestically, just behind World War Z in the summer of 2013, which made $66.4 million. Then we have F1 at $57 million. June has been a pretty good month for Brad Pitt because Mr. and Mrs. Smith opened to $50 million back in 2005, and Troy opened to $46.8 million in June 2004. Then we have Megamind rounding out the top 10, followed by Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Ocean's 12, Ocean's 11, Inglourious Bastards, and Interview with the Vampire back in 1994. Brad Pitt, though, has now had a top 10 opener in each of the last 4 decades, so let's adjust those openings for inflation. And you can see that inflation adjusted, World War Z is still number one at $91.6 million, followed by Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Troy. Interview with the Vampire graduates up to the top 5 after you adjust for inflation at $78.9 million, followed by Ocean's 11 and Megamind. Ocean's 12 comes in 7th place, followed by Inglourious Bastards in 8th place, which adjusted for inflation opened almost exactly where we saw the opening of F1 the movie this past weekend. And then Ocean's 13 rounds out Brad Pitt's personal top 10. So a good start for F1. The only thing holding it back just a little bit is that hefty production budget, the big marketing. However, they did have a lot of tie-ins that brought in some money. You have Apple, which has very deep pockets. There were some tax incentives reportedly involved with the production of the film. So I think that it is well on its way to profitability, and we'll see what it does in the next few weeks. I also wanted to address M3GAN 2.0. I mentioned it had one of the biggest drop-offs from the first film to the second film in a series that we've seen this decade. And these are the 10 biggest drop-offs from film 1 to film 2 in a series, not necessarily in a franchise, but in a series of films. And it's a real grab bag of reasons why we've seen theatrical grosses fall this decade. The biggest drop-off was for Wonder Woman 1984, which dropped 83.8% from the opening of the first Wonder Woman film. Of course, this was in late 2020. Not many theaters were open, not many people were going to theaters, and the movie was available day and date on streaming. So there's a lot more to that than just the number. In second, we have Mufasa the Lion King, which kind of opened in that right around Christmas death zone where the weekend falls just before the Christmas holiday. But as we covered here on the show, Mufasa was able to do really well that holiday season and wound up being a box office, if not a huge hit, certainly not a failure. Then we have The Croods: A New Age, which dropped 77.7% from movie 1 to movie 2. That's another late 2020 release, so not really surprising that there was a big drop there. The Marvels is in 4th place, a 69.9% drop off from the first film. No mitigating factors there, just a loss of audience interest. Then we have The Boss Baby Family Business, which dropped 68%. Again, that was a day and date film. It was also available on streaming. M3GAN 2.0 had the 6th worst drop off from film 1 to film 2 at 66.5%. Followed by Spirit Untamed, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which was another Christmas release that recovered very well and did incredibly well as the box office went through the Christmas holidays and into the new year. Then we had Joker: Folie à Deux. Again, no real mitigating factors, just audiences didn't care that much and really didn't like the movie that much either. And then we had Don't Breathe 2, which dropped 59.8%. There were a couple of movies that would have made this list, Orphan: First Kill, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery, but they were not given wide releases like the other films, so I didn't really feel like it was a one-to-one comparison. But still, M3GAN 2.0, as far as the 2020s go, a really steep drop-off from that first film, and we'll see what it does over this July 4th weekend. How to Train Your Dragon keeps ticking up toward becoming the highest grossing film in the franchise. It's now at $200.2 million, only about $17 million from passing the original animated film to be the top grossing How to Train Your Dragon film domestically. When you adjust for inflation, though, it's still just behind How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. It's only about $40 million, though, from grabbing that number 2 spot from How to Train Your Dragon 2, although it's got a lot of work to do if it wants to match the $321.1 million adjusted for inflation that we saw from the first 2010 film. Elio is not moving up the charts as rapidly. This is the franchise tracker for Pixar, and you can see that Elio remains the lowest grossing Pixar release at $41.9 million. It's about $20 million behind Onward, which had its release heavily cut short by theater closures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, I don't see an Elemental-like recovery happening at this moment. It wasn't a disastrous weekend number 2, but if you look and see where Elemental ended up, it made $154.4 million. I just don't see a path to that right now for Elio, but I will continue tracking it on the show, as I always do. And when we talk about the 28 Days, Weeks, Years Later franchise, 28 Years Later is now the highest grossing film of the franchise domestically at $50.4 million, ahead of the $45 million that 28 Days Later made. Though when you adjust for inflation, 28 Years Later needs to make about $28 million more to pass 28 Days Later, which made $78.7 million adjusted. We have a real race going on for the number one movie of the year so far between a Minecraft movie and Lilo and Stitch. This is how they stack up through 38 days of release, and you can see that Lilo and Stitch had the early lead. Minecraft caught up, but now the gap is narrowing somewhat. No matter who ends up number one, this is going to be a very, very close race, and I think it's going to come down to how many families show up over this holiday week to see Lilo and Stitch, and is that enough of a boost to just edge it past Minecraft? Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is moving up the Mission Impossible domestic gross chart. It is now the 5th highest grossing Mission Impossible film, passing Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Mission Impossible 3. Though when you adjust for inflation, it's still at number 7. It is ahead of Dead Reckoning Part 1, but it is about $30 million, a little less than $30 million behind Mission Impossible 3, and it's got a long way to go if it wants to catch up to Rogue Nation. It does not have a path to $263.9 million, but if it does well, it could get up to number 6. I also wanted to address Materialists, which is now one of A24's top 10 grossing domestic films of all time, ahead of Baby Girl and Moonlight. It's about $5 million behind The Iron Claw. It could get there, and then the question is, will it get to $44 million to pass my beloved Hereditary? I'm not quite sure if it's going to, but you never know. Well, we've reached the end of another month, which means that it's time to talk about the cumulative box office so far this year, as well as the market share for all of the different studios. So let's check out the cumulative box office first. This is where we were in May. We made up a lot of ground that month and built up a pretty big lead on the gross of 2024 through May, and we're really catching up to where we were at that point in 2023. Let's take a look and see where we are now that we're in June, and you can see that we lost a little bit of ground versus 2024, but box office overall is still up by about $500 million over where we were at the end of last June. We did lose some ground versus 2023. We now trail where we were 2 years ago by a little less than $400 million, but there are a lot of big July releases this year, so I think that the next chart that we look at the end of July is going to be very telling for where we actually stand as far as the box office goes. This is where the market share stood at the end of May. Disney had a lead at 31.87%, with Warner Brothers at 26.47%, and no other major studio in double digits. And this is what it looks like at the end of June. Disney still has the lead at 30%. It lost a few percentage points. Most of those went to Universal. Universal has a double-digit market share. It now has 13.22% of all tickets sold since January 1st. But Warner Brothers remains the number 2 studio at 23.77%. Of course, Universal's got Jurassic World Rebirth coming out this upcoming month. Disney has Fantastic Four: The First Steps. Warner Brothers has Superman. So all 3 of the studios in the lead right now have some pretty high profile films, and we'll see if that changes the market share when we look at it this time next month. And we are entering the month of July. Today is July 1st, so I wanted to take a look ahead at the movies that are coming out in July. My member poll question this week is, what July release are you most looking forward to? The movie that you just can't wait to see. If you're a member here on the channel, you can leave your pick in the comments of the member poll, which is live now. If your pick is already there, you can upvote your favorite, and the 5 picks with the most upvotes will be revealed right here on the show next week. And just to give you a primer so you don't have to look it up, some July 2025 releases include Jurassic World Rebirth, which comes out tomorrow, Superman, Eddington, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Smurfs, The Fantastic Four, First Steps, Jujutsu Kaisen, Hidden Inventory, Premature Death, and then a couple of high-profile films on Netflix, The Old Guard 2 and Happy Gilmore 2, or any other movie that you want to see. Last week, I asked the members here on the channel, what is the best racing/driving film of all time? And this is what I love about the open-ended questions. I had never considered Mad Max Fury Road when I asked the question, but it was the number 1 answer, and of course, it's the perfect answer with 38 votes. Just behind, though, with 36 votes, is Baby Driver. Ford v Ferrari came in third with 22 votes. Then we had Rush in 4th place with 18 votes, and Speed Racer, another movie I didn't even think of when I was formulating that member poll question, coming in 5th place with 14 votes. And as we transition into July, of course, the first big movie hitting theaters is Jurassic World Rebirth. So I wanted to ask a Jurassic-themed question this week for our trivia question. And that question is, the original Jurassic Park was the top-grossing movie in the summer of 1993. What were the other 4 highest-grossing films in the top 5? I will say that they're all movies that I think hold up and that people still talk about today, with some big stars that are still A-list stars today. I'll give you another minute to think about it. And the other 4 films that were in the top 5 in the summer of 1993 behind Jurassic Park were The Fugitive, a great movie, Tom Cruise in The Firm, Sleepless in Seattle, and In the Line of Fire, starring Clint Eastwood, which is a movie that I really love. I don't know if a lot of people still know that movie, but if you haven't seen In the Line of Fire, it's a great thriller. So yeah, geez, I mean, looking at those movies, what a summer, 1993. I was only 10 years old. I think I only saw a couple of those in theaters, but I think I would honestly sit down and watch any one of those movies right now. Let's turn our attention now from the domestic box office to the international box office and see what the top 5 films were outside of the US and Canada. At number 1 was F1 the movie, which made $89.3 million. That was also adjusted up from earlier estimates on yesterday. How to Train Your Dragon brought in $32.6 million. Detective Conan One-Eyed Flashback opened in China and did very well there. I believe it was actually the number 1 movie in China this past weekend. It brought in $23.2 million. Then we have 28 Years Later with $13.7 million, and Lilo and Stitch bringing in $13.1 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 5 films worldwide. And the number 1 movie in the world was F1 the movie at $146.3 million. That is a great start for that film, and we'll see how it holds up over the next several weeks. How to Train Your Dragon brought in another $50 million worldwide this past weekend, and it's getting close to that $500 million mark. 28 Years Later saw a similar slide worldwide. It dropped 61%, not quite as heavily as it did here domestically, for a $23.4 million weekend. It's now over $100 million worldwide. Detective Conan One-Eyed Flashback brought in $23.2 million. That brings its worldwide total up to $124 million. And Elio had a better second weekend worldwide than it did domestically. It dropped just 36.6% to bring in $22.1 million for a $72.3 million total. If it is going to have a recovery at the box office, it needs the rest of the world to chip in. And so far, not a bad week number 2. F1 the movie had the 8th best opening so far this year worldwide at $146.3 million. That puts it ahead of Detective Chinatown 1900 and Final Destination Bloodlines, and a little bit behind Thunderbolts, which opened to $162.1 million. A Minecraft movie, still the best opening weekend of the year at $313.4 million. And 28 Years Later is now also the highest grossing film in the franchise worldwide, and the first one to break the $100 million mark. It comes in ahead of 28 Days Later, which made $82.7 million worldwide, and 28 Weeks Later, which made $64.2 million worldwide. Elio is not the lowest grossing film from Pixar worldwide, but that's because it's above Luca and Turning Red, which have very low grosses because they were only released in some territories. They went straight to Disney Plus and a lot of other territories. So it's number 27 all time for Pixar. But look at Elemental there at number 18. It was able to recover and made almost $500 million. I mean, Elio is really hoping it has some of that luck. Let's turn now to what I call our specialty box office, and we will start with the per theater averages for this past weekend. At number 1 was In the Mood for Love. It's a 25th anniversary re-release. It brought in $23,269 per theater in 2 theaters. That film's by Wong Kar-wai, and it is very often stated to be one of the best movies of the 21st century. Sorry Baby comes in second place. It played in 4 theaters and brought in $21,623 per theater. It was my favorite movie that I saw virtually at the Sundance Film Festival a few months ago, and it will be going into wider release over the next few weeks. Apocalypse Now hits the top 5 again as its roadshow exhibition continues. It brought in $16,446 per theater in 1 theater. Then we have F1 the movie, which brought in $15,570 in each of its 3,661 theaters. And finally, the documentary The Last Class, bringing in $10,650 in 1 theater. It's about Robert Reich, the former Secretary of Labor, and his last lecture to an audience full of students. Looking at the top 5 films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, at number 1 is Sardar G 3, which is a Punjabi language horror comedy from India. that was actually not released in India due to the political situation between India and Pakistan. The film features an actress from Pakistan, and there was some uproar about that. So reportedly, her role is being recast, and they're going to reshoot her part of the movie, and then reportedly, again, release this film in its altered version later on in the year, but it did see an international release. In second place was a holdover, Sitare Zameen Par, which brought in a little under $500,000 in an unknown number of theaters. Then in third place is Kanapa, a Telugu language film based on Hindu writings. In fourth place is Kubera, another holdover from last week, which brought in $242,000. And in fifth place is Sorry Baby, which brought in a total of $86,000 from 4 theaters. This is the 2025 domestic summer box office so far. Lilo & Stitch is number 1, pretty much doubling up the gross of the number 2 movie, which is now How to Train Your Dragon. It's up 2 spots from last week. Thunderbolts is down 1 spot, and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is down 1 spot, though it's very close to passing Thunderbolts domestically. Final Destination: Bloodlines remains in 5th place. F1 the Movie debuts in 6th place for the summer. Ballerina, Karate Kid Legends, and 28 Years Later all move down 1 spot, and Elio stays in the number 10 spot. Materialist is now out of the summer top 10. And when we look at my predictions versus the actual box office, right now, I correctly have predicted the number 1 and number 2 movie of the summer, although that very well may change. I picked Lilo & Stitch number 1 and How to Train Your Dragon number 2. My numbers 3 and 4 picks haven't opened yet, Superman and Fantastic Four. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning I picked to be number 5 for the summer. It's currently at number 4. Jurassic World Rebirth was my pick for number 6 this summer. It opens, of course, tomorrow. F1 the Movie I did predict to be a top 10 film. I predicted it number 7. That might be a bit too low. We'll see how it does in the upcoming weeks. Thunderbolts I picked at number 8. I think I was a little too low on that, but I was way too high on Elio. It is currently still in the summer box office top 10, but its days are numbered. That is going to be, I think, unless it has an absolutely miraculous recovery, one of my top 10 picks that would be incorrect and will not make the summer top 10. And then my last pick, The Bad Guys 2, doesn't open until August. This is the 2025 domestic box office so far this year, with the Minecraft movie currently at number 1 with $423.9 million. The Lilo & Stitch is now close behind at $400 million. Sinners is at number 3 with $278 million, followed by Captain America: Brave New World, but it's only about $250,000 ahead of How to Train Your Dragon, so that movie's going to be at number 4 in short order. Thunderbolts and Mission Impossible both move down 1 spot. Final Destination: Bloodline stays at number 8, with Dogman and Snow White for right now rounding out the top 10. And this is the worldwide box office for 2025 so far this year. How to Train Your Dragon moves up to number 6 with $454.4 million. That bumps down Captain America: Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and Sinners. The top 5 remains the same, but I think that How to Train Your Dragon is going to be in that top 5 by next week. And we'll also see if F1 the movie can get into the top 10 by the time we do the show next week. So that's what I've got for you from the world of the box office. But before we wrap up the show, I also want to take a look at the world of streaming. These are the latest numbers from Netflix, which cover the week of June 16th through the 22nd. New numbers are going to come out later today. And at number 1, continuing its dominance on Netflix, is the Tyler Perry film Straw, which logged another 20 million views. That bumps K-pop Demon Hunters down to 2nd place. It brought in 9.24 million views. And it's exactly what the title says. It's about a K-pop group who also fights demons. A lot of people asking me if I've seen it. I have not, but I've heard it's pretty good. In 3rd place was the premiere of The Waterfront Season 1, which is the latest series from Kevin Williamson. It is set in North Carolina, naturally, and it's about a fishing dynasty and the drama that surrounds it. It brought in 8.31 million views. Ginny and Georgia Season 3 remains in the top 5 with another 8.13 million views, followed by Trainwreck: The Astroworld Tragedy, the Netflix original movie KO, Titan: The Ocean Gate Disaster, which brought in 6.7 million views, Plane, starring Gerard Butler, which brought in 6.56 million views, then another Trainwreck special, Trainwreck: Mayor of Mayhem, which is about the stormy tenure of Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, who became so infamous that I, an American, actually knew for a short time who the mayor of Toronto was. And rounding out the top 10 is Copycat, the 1995 Sigourney Weaver thriller, because, why not? These are the most watched movies on Netflix so far in 2025, and Straw is on the verge of being the second film after Back in Action to break the 100 million view mark. It's currently number 2 on the chart, ahead of Exterritorial. The Life List and Havoc get bumped down to numbers 4 and 5. Counterattack, Ad Vitam, The Electric State, Nona's, and I Hostage continue to round out the top 10. And when we look at the most watched shows on Netflix so far this year, Sirens moves up to number 4. It's broken the 50 million view barrier. That bumps American Murder, Gabby Petito down to number 5. And Ginny and Georgia Season 3 breaks into the top 10 at number 8 with 42.65 million views. That bumps up the kids show Miss Rachel Season 1. These are the most watched programs, movie or show on Netflix of 2025, and you can see that Straw is now a top 5 program at number 4, behind Squid Game Season 2, Adolescence, and Back in Action. The rest of the top 10 remains pretty much the same, with The Life List and Havoc both moving down to numbers 6 and 7. And of course, next week we're going to be able to see what the first numbers for Squid Game 3 look like. If it's anything like the 2 previous seasons, it will be shaking up this chart quite a bit. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, these are US only numbers. They're not global like the Netflix numbers we just looked at. And they also take about a month to get to us. So these are the numbers from May 26th to June 1st. And let's start with the most watched streaming movies for that week. At number 1, we have the debut of Captain America Brave New World on Disney+, which brought in 12.5 million hours watched. Not bad, it's a number 1 debut, but not as high as some other MCU films that we've seen. The Wild Robot is in second place, available on various streaming services, followed by the original Lilo and Stitch on Disney+, Apple's Fountain of Youth, which is at number 4, A Widow's Game making its debut at number 5, Nona's at number 6, Instant Family at number 7, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning remaining in the top 10 at number 8, Moana 2 at number 9, and Mickey 17 making its debut on the list due to its streaming debut on Max with 3.3 million hours watched. And The Wild Robot has now become one of the most watched streaming movies so far this year in the US through June 1st. It enters the list at number 7 with 33 million hours watched. That bumps down Kraven the Hunter, The Life List, and Den of Thieves 2. Havoc is out of the US top 10, and Moana 2 remains number 1 with over 100 million hours watched. These were the most watched streaming shows from May 26th through June 1st. At number 1 was Sirens, which increased its hours watched in its first full week of availability to 25.1 million. The Big Bang Theory comes in second place, followed by The Handmaid's Tale as it wrapped up its series finale. Bluey is in fourth place, NCIS is in fifth, SpongeBob SquarePants is in sixth, Grey's Anatomy is in seventh. Then we have a couple of debuts. Department Q from Netflix debuts in eighth place with 12.48 million hours watched, and The Better Sister debuts from Amazon Prime Video with 12.18 million hours watched. The Last of Us, as it wrapped out its latest season, is at number 10. So not really a big boost for viewership as we hit that season finale. Looking at watch time per available episode for that same week, this is when you take the total watch time and divide it by the number of episodes that you can watch at home. Sirens put up a great number with 5.03 million hours watched per episode, followed by Cold Case, The Tylenol Murders, a true crime series on Netflix with 3.59 million hours per episode. Then we have The Better Sister at 1.52 million hours per episode, and Department Q at 1.39 million hours per episode. Mobland rounds out the top 5, followed by Apple TV's Your Friends and Neighbors with 725,000 hours per episode. The Last of Us in 7th place at 719,000 hours per episode. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives in 8th place. Andor sticking around in 9th place with 267,000 hours per episode. And The Handmaid's Tale at number 10 with 227,000 hours per episode. And that per episode watch time, as I mentioned, was better even than the debut week for Sirens. That 5.03 million hours per episode time is third best for the year so far, coming in just behind Zero Day, but still healthily behind Adolescence, which still holds the record at just over 6 million hours per episode in its first full week of availability on Netflix. Squid Game is currently at number 4. We'll see if it can get back on the chart with the debut of the final season. We won't have those numbers for a few more weeks. And the first week of Sirens rounds out the top 5 at 4.52 million hours per episode. And that wraps us up for this week, but very quickly, I wanted to give you a heads up on some things that you might be interested in watching, both in theaters and at home. First of all, today, on Tuesday, the final 3 episodes of Ironheart will debut on Disney+. That will wrap out the series. Also, there's a few recent movies that will be available for purchase and also premium rental on demand. First of all, we have From the World of John Wick, Ballerina, then Bring Her Back, although you might want to schedule a therapy session if you're going to watch that movie at home for directly after you watch the film. And Thunderbolts will also be available on sale and for premium video on demand today. Tomorrow, we have the opening of Jurassic World Rebirth in theaters everywhere. My review for that film is on the channel right now. And in limited release, we have a film called 40 Acres. It's an action movie starring Danielle Deadwyler. If you prefer to stay home, The Old Guard 2 debuts tomorrow on Netflix. 5 years after it became a hit in the summer of 2020, Charlize Theron returns for a sequel from director Victoria Mahoney. On Amazon Prime Video tomorrow, you can check out Heads of State. John Cena and Idris Elba play a rival U.S. president and British prime minister who have to team up and kick some butt. I'd like to see a crossover with Harrison Ford, maybe in the sequel. This Thursday, the long-awaited second season of The Sandman hits Netflix. At least the first volume does. You're going to have to wait a few more weeks if you want to see season 2, volume 2. Then on Friday, in what I assume will be very limited release, you can check out Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse. This is a full 4K restoration of the landmark 1991 documentary about the often disastrous production of Apocalypse Now. And this is a big one. Also on Friday, Sinners will be making its streaming debut on Max. I anticipate a lot of watch time on the streaming charts for that movie. Then starting on Saturday and also extending into Sunday and Monday, This Is Spinal Tap will be returning to theaters for its 41st anniversary, remastered and remixed with a look at the forthcoming sequel. I've never actually seen that movie in theaters. Maybe I'll take some time this upcoming weekend and check it out. And that's all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for listening to me spout off this endless stream of numbers. If you like what you see, maybe hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when I'm putting out a new video, and be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest in box office, movie reviews, news, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.